Let's explore the relationship between the individual, you and I, and the cultural and natural ecology that we emerge out of and participate in co-creating, and the opportunity for interception, for intervention in that relay of energy with all that is, with the other, with the transcendent. To transcend simply means to move outside of the system. So a closed system, a relay between the individual and their cult, is generally a very tight relationship. It starts out as an almost identical relationship where the child, without reason, without question, ingests the identity. They allow their I, what they attach to be formed by the thoughts, the feelings, the words, the ways of being, and the behavior, the actions of the giants upon whom they depend to survive. A child downloads sympathetically the memes, the protocol, the codes of their cult or culture, represented in the family system. Now, in a healthy developmental cycle, that will move from sympathy into antipathy as the adolescent questions, rejects, and criticizes the worst of the status quo, the worst of the code that has been given to it, setting the stage for the adult, which emerges to varying degrees, sometimes not at all, as the maturation process continues. The adult is neither in sympathy nor in blind antipathy, because the child is in a state of blind acceptance of what is. The adolescent is in a reactive state of rejection of what is. And these two polarities create the synergy, the third energy, which is always greater than the sum of its parts, that allow a questioning and an embrace of the best of what is and the best of what was, a rejection of the worst of what is and the worst of what was, and an invitation, a creation of something new, something better that did not exist before it was synergized, created, produced by the adult. And so this process of sympathy-antipathy synthesis is shattered, is interrupted by trauma, and is permanently arrested in post-traumatic stress disorder, in PTSD. A good way of understanding that is that the I, the ego, the one that defines itself as I, has identity, a pattern that it attaches to. This is me. I am these thoughts, these feelings, these words, these behaviors, these ways of being. This is my identity. I identify with these patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And they're patterns because they repeat. That's how we know who we are. I know you. Why? Because I've seen you before. The pattern is coherent. That's my thought. How do I know it's my thought? Maybe it's grandfather's thought or grandma's thought. No, I know it's my thought because I thought it before. Well, where did you get it from, right? Well, it doesn't matter. It's mine. It's mine. I've attached to it. So it's now mine. So we have identity. And it's mine, right? And having established identity that I am attached to, we now defend the borders of that identity, right? Because for the ego that identifies with a specific pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and the body is part of that being, part of that doing, part of that thinking, part of that feeling, right? The body produces chemicals that facilitate feeling. The body records and organizes chemicals that facilitate thought. In order to do something, the body must move blood and neurons and things in different ways. So the body is an integral part. It is the vehicle through which the I, the ego, identifies, attaches to the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Identity. And having defined this boundary, because the boundary is defined by this is my thought, and that's your thought. Your thought has a different frequency, a different pattern. This is my action, and that's your action. Your action is, that way, and my action is this way. Because every pattern of energy is slightly different, right? Life loves diversity and expresses that in uniqueness. Every pattern is unique to some degree. Some have just mutated 0.1%. It's expressed a little different. Even if the words are the same, the pitch of the voice is different, right? So there's mutation. The ego defines itself with separation. I'm this and you're that. And having separated, it defends its identity, its pattern. This is me. Nobody's going to change me. I'm going to do what I want to do. It's all about I to the ego. I identity. I do this. I choose that. So we now have a boundary. And whenever two energy patterns collide, whenever a pinball and a bowling ball collide, the pinball goes flying. The bowling ball continues on its trajectory. Pinball coming along 5 miles an hour, bowling ball coming along 5 miles an hour. When they bang into each other, the larger pattern of energy, the larger mass, displaces the smaller mass. The pinball goes flying. The bowling ball continues. It's the law of mass. The larger energy shatters the pattern of the smaller energy. The pattern of the pinball going along at 5 miles an hour, and the pattern of the pinball bouncing off the bowling ball based on the physics of that energy exchange. So pinballs don't have an I. They don't have a consciousness that says, this is me, I'm doing this. And so a pinball does not get traumatized. Its pattern may be interrupted, its pattern may be shattered. You could hit a pinball with a bullet and split it, right? And the energy just transforms. But for the ego is relatively slow. It's very, 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 very hard for the ego to keep up with all that is going on. And so the digestion process of integration of what's going on and being able to keep up as identity grows in response to its environment is fragile. And what trauma is for the ego is the experience of colliding with the bowling ball. A pattern of energy that is too big to digest and that shatters our identity, our pattern of knowing who we are and knowing what's next and feeling a sense of continuity is shattered. It's interrupted. It's broken. I can't go back to the way I was before. Yes. And I don't know what the new identity is, and I don't know who I am, and I don't feel safe because I've lost my identity, I've lost my pattern, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to keep myself safe, and I don't know what to do. I want to be safe, says the ego. I want identity, I want a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that's safe, that is not going to be tsunamied by the next wave, by the next bowling ball, right? And this also brings up an important awareness, an important realization. The ego is a fractal representation of the cult, first the family as a representation of that cult and of the cult or culture, which again is defined by a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. We, in this cult, eat borscht. We eat borscht. What's that? It's beets and yogurt and we don't do that. Why not? It's just not what we do, right? Cults don't define themselves based on rationality and, here are all the available choices, which one would facilitate the most well-being in the moment. That's a big question, right? We don't know, right? It's just easier to do what we do because that's what we do, right? Originally, it probably had something to do with there were beets around and we didn't have any other ideas. So, someone made some borscht and there it is. So we eat borscht. Well, we eat grasshoppers. Well, we eat curry. That's just what we do. And we do it because we do it. And we do it because we did it. And we did it because that's the thing to do, and that's what we do. That's what makes a loop. That's what makes a self-referential cult. And there's no reason to break that pattern, right? If you're doing it because you're doing it, right? When's that going to change? I do this because I do it, and that's why I do it, right? That's a closed loop. It's just going to go round and round and round. Now, anything that refuses to grow, to evolve, to change in relay, in relationship with the larger body, with all that is, eventually becomes a liability. Right? Life is about growth. Life is about expansion. Life is about change. And anything that refuses to grow, refuses to change, ultimately collides with life. And as it does so, it either embraces and opens up and changes, or it is shattered and broken into its constituent parts and reassimilated into the ecology in a more suitable, in a more compatible form with life, right? So that's life's pattern. But the ego's pattern is about holding on, particularly the traumatized ego, the one that is afraid of change, afraid of the unknown, afraid of death. The traumatized ego, the fear-based ego, doesn't want to change at all. Doesn't want to change. No, I want to continue what I'm doing so that I know who I am. I am the identity, and that's who I am, right? And there's no way for that to change, so it eventually collides. And one of the ways that we can see this in the history of humanity, anthropologists estimate that there have been 10,000 cults, 10,000 ways of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Each with their own paradigm, each with their own language, their own custom. What's a custom? It's a pattern. It's a pattern. They're doing this pattern, and most of those cults are now extinct. A cult continues what it's doing, often self-referentially, often looking to the past. It worked in the past, so I'll do it in the present. When I want to know what to do next, I will look to the past. That kept us safe in the past. But reality is always changing, and so what kept us safe in the past no longer keeps us safe in the present and the future. It's just a matter of time between when the same pattern of energy moves from an asset, a benefit, to neutral, no benefit, no harm, to being profoundly harmful. It's just a matter of time, right? If the human body still went underwater and tried to extract air from water, we would drown. At one time, the body was in the water, and then it emerged onto land, right? If we were still in water, right, we wouldn't have the opportunities. We wouldn't have the experiences for better or for worse. Today, we have evolved. That means we have iterated, changed our pattern. And the most efficient patterns consume energy from the least efficient patterns. Right? So life is predisposed to win, to become more complex, to become more intelligent. And the patterns of energy that we encounter either evolve, become more complex, more intelligent, or they are consumed, they cease to exist. 95% of all cults, of all cultures in human history are now dead. They're dead cults, they're dead languages, they're dead ideas, because they were consumed by an ecology or by another cult that was more efficient in some way at transforming energy into well-being, at consuming energy and facilitating survival, security, love and belonging. And life's been doing that. 95% or more of all species are also dead or have evolved. Right? Some species come to a dead end and don't evolve, and that's the last one. Other species, moving towards that, evolve. And by the time they meet the larger energy, they are in attunement, in a symbiotic relationship, a synergistic relationship, and they evolve, they change. The ego is very small, which means that there are many patterns of energy that are vastly bigger, that have a bigger mass, a bigger velocity, a larger charge than the ego. Right? Now, this means that as the ego moves towards those energies, it will either evolve, it will attune, it will adjust, or it will be shattered, it will be traumatized. It won't see the change coming. And it'll hit the larger energy. And the larger energy will not shatter. The cult will continue its status quo. But the ego will be broken, will be wounded, will be overwhelmed, will be in a state of chaotic, unmanageable intensity as its thoughts, as its feelings, as its behavior, as its body ruptures and cannot be put back together again. That's trauma. And in the chaos of that collision between a larger mass of energy and a smaller mass of energy, in the chaos of that collision, the ego desperately looks for a new identity, a new pattern. Who am I? Who am I? I'm out of control. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And in the need for certainty and in the need for endurance, one of the things the ego looks for is the strongest pattern that it has encountered. You look at the fact that many children who were bullied become bullies because their innocence was shattered by a bully. But the bully was not shattered by their innocence. And the conclusion of the ego is that the bully pattern is stronger than the innocent pattern. And the ego is so frightened of death because death to the ego is the loss of control, the loss of coherency of the pattern, whatever it is. The ego is so frightened that many times it will grasp the identity, the pattern of its abuser, of its violator. It will now identify, attach to the pattern of the bully. The bully becomes their teacher. You have a pattern that isn't breaking. I will be like you, Dad. I will be like you, Mom. I will be like you, older brother. I will assume the new identity that didn't break in order to survive as identity, as an identity, because I don't want to repeat that trauma. I will hold on to the new identity. And similarly, with PTSD, the strongest pattern of my entire life was the moment in which I was broken apart. That pattern of terror, helplessness, that was a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And then I was lost, I was changed into something. I was lost, I was changed. And that pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, as I went through the trauma, as I went up to the car was spinning and this, the ego grabs onto it as identity, as a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. This is who I am. I'm this. I don't want to die. I don't want to dissolve, says the ego. I want to exist. And if the strongest pattern is the most miserable, intense, horrific moment of my entire life, that is a pattern, and it's secure. Nothing has broken that pattern. I was broken by that pattern, so I'm going to hold on to it. I now have a new identity, a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing that consists of reliving the worst moment of my life over and 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 over. But I've got a new pattern. I've got something. I'm not letting it go. Right? Because on the other side, I don't know. If the ego is more frightened of not knowing, more frightened of death than of misery, which egos are, right? Because without a pattern, the ego faces death. The pattern is the ego, right? That's the identity. So now we have PTSD, where anytime I don't know who I am, I think and feel that memory again. So I'm getting over. I don't want to lose that, right? And now nobody can take that from me, right? If someone rapes me again, then my identity of being a rape survivor strengthens. So my ego is stronger. I have a stronger pattern. I am now a rape survivor or a rape victim. And every time somebody rapes me, my identity gets stronger. I know who I am. I know what I think. I know what I feel. I've got identity. I've got a pattern. And it's strong because when somebody isn't raping me, I'm remembering it. And so it's a strong pattern. And when they are, it doesn't change. It strengthens because it's consistent. I've got a pattern. I know who I am. Right? My innocence is broken. My faith is broken. My trust is broken. I can't invest in that. It's a broken pattern. It failed me as a vehicle of I. But this has always been there. This is always reliable. I have this identity, and I'm not going to let it go, because that means death, because that means the unknown, because that means dread. So we have trauma. Another way of looking at trauma, as that bowling ball colliding with the pinball, is the energy is too big to digest, and so the ego shatters. But that energy is our reality. That is the energy that is part of life at this time. Right? That is where life has evolved to, this pattern of energy. And we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to integrate it into our ego, into our identity. It doesn't fit. So I've got to resist it. But it's bigger than me, so it breaks me down as I resist it. You can think of it, someone with dreams. That this larger energy is trying to get through and be integrated into the smaller energy, is shattering and breaking down the smaller energy over and over and over. I don't want to think about that, we say. But some part of us that needs certainty holds on to it. I don't want to deal with it, we say. But the only way to let that energy pass through is to open the space to let it pass through. The ego is only so big. How do you get a bowling ball to pass through a pinball? Sometimes by avoiding it, sometimes by taking the bowling ball and breaking it into small pieces. Sometimes, as in the phenomena of giving birth, just opening up and letting go of the identity, letting go of the ego long enough to let the energy, like a child coming out of the womb, pass through and be gone, right? Because if this energy is moving in this direction, and this energy is too small to let it in, it will bang on the door until it is let through, right? And most of reality, or at least half of it, is bigger than we are. And much of reality does not coincide, does not align with our cult. Right? The trouble with dentities, whether on an ego level or on a cult level, is that in their self-referential nature, 90% of identity, 90% of a pattern is suboptimal. If you look at any cult on the planet, any culture, and you do a scientific analysis of what would facilitate the most amount of sustainable well-being for its people, its members, and then what is it doing, you will see that everything the cult is doing is wrong. Some 180 degrees wrong, some 10% wrong, some 20% wrong, some the opposite of what's good for its people is what the cult is mandating. All cults grow increasingly out of sync with their ecology because of their self-referential nature. And most cults spend more energy maintaining their identity, sustaining who they are, than they do iterating and evolving to be useful. Most cults spend more energy perpetuating the status quo blindly than they do analyzing reality and evolving. And this is why 95% of all the cults in human history are dead. They didn't integrate when they encountered the larger energy. The pattern just broke down. Right? So we find ourselves as a small energy in relationship with the larger world. The larger world invites us to change, invites us to iterate, to participate in evolution. But reality is really, really big, and the ego doesn't want to change, doesn't want to be overwhelmed with this choice and that choice and this choice and that choice. It doesn't want to be overwhelmed. Doesn't want to change. So it continues what it's doing. It's status quo. And it hits. And it doesn't want to change even more. I don't want to look at that. I want to continue what I'm doing before. And it hits. Right? The ego continues with great attachment the pattern that it is familiar with, that was given to it by the family. The safety of the known in fear of the unknown. And often, as the ego fails to attune to reality and crashes into it, the ego doesn't distrust itself, it distrusts reality and tries to avoid reality, right? And then it bangs into it some more because reality doesn't go away just because we're afraid of it. We have to get smaller and smaller and smaller to hang on to our pattern, to not think, to not explore. How many people don't want to think, don't want to be able and willing to respond? They want to do what they've always done. Right? Helm's Deep. The Rohirrim always retreat to Helm's Deep where it's safe. We don't confront the new enemy. We don't ride out. We protect our people in the caves. That's what we do. Says the Lord of the Horsemen. Right? But eventually, when that becomes too predictable in a sociopathic environment, then that becomes the prison. That becomes the trap, right? Where, as technology evolves, see, they always went to Helm's Deep in the past. But that was before gunpowder, right? Britain, in the past, the Royal Navy always protected them, but then there were airplanes. And then there were bombs and longer cannons. And so what we went to in the past becomes a liability because we're believing in something that worked back then, but the world has changed. And that very belief that enabled supremacy is now a liability. It's a net negative because it's a blind spot. It worked in the past, not in the present. Let's be here with this. Where's the next step? You see, my ego doesn't know. So I don't want to be here in the unknown. I want to be somewhere I know, somewhere which means something familiar, something that I understand. But what's needed, what's necessary to evolve, to grow, is not something that I know. It's something that I have yet to know. It's something that you have yet to know. It's something that we as a species have yet to know. And so it involves sitting, right, in the unknown, facing death, because the unknown will consume every pattern. Every single thought, feeling, word, way of being will be consumed by the unknown. The unknown is 99.9% of reality. It's always calling us to think in new ways, to behave in new ways, to be in new ways, to develop our bodies in new ways. It's inviting us. And we will come, or we will become part of the vast amount of what is and what has been that is extinct, that no longer dances with totality, with what is. It wouldn't change. It couldn't see. And ceases to be.